name is Marianne Monson, and I'm the author of Her Quiet Revolution. It's a historical fiction novel based on the life of Martha Hughes Cannon. Dr. Cannon was not only a frontier doctor who graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School in the late 1800s, but she also went on to become the United States' first female state senator. And she really dedicated her public service to issues of health, and she fought to eradicate outbreaks and disease. Really, the motivation for Martha's life as a physician and a servant dedicated to issues of public health, they can be traced back to her early experiences when she immigrated as a pioneer on the Mormon Trail. And I'm reading today, with permission from Shadow Mountain Publishing, the portion of Martha's journey when her baby sister falls ill with the dreaded mountain fever. And many in camp were afflicted with this, but Martha went on to lose not only her sister but her father to the disease as well. And this experience in her early life really motivated her to be able to become a doctor and to strive to preserve life. Of course, like all doctors, she put herself in situations where she was facing a lot of risk, and that's of course a part of service within the medical community. So I'm reading this passage today from the beginning part of Her Quiet Revolution. Wishing for some magic to aid her, Elizabeth focused on the child before her, angling the dear feverish forehead upward to ease the entrance of breath. She added her frayed wrap to the baby's threadbare coverings, straining helplessly against her longing for a village healer, her own mother, or perhaps for medicine and understanding. Others in camp had blessed the child before sunset, but now the company slept, exhausted from the work of day and worn from caring for others afflicted with the dreaded mountain fever. So near the end of their journey, there were few hands able to help the suffering. Elizabeth's oldest daughter slept on unaware, and at last the baby too relaxed into slumber. Kneeling on the floor of the tent, the mother allowed the long hours of care to descend upon her shoulders, becoming one more burden to be hefted over 800 miles. Her daughters turned toward each other in sleep, leaving her alone with the dark edges of her mind. Hoo, hoo, the accursed bird sounded again, beckoning from some scrubby, gnarled pine sheltered in a crevice of wilderness. In the distance, a dog whined, the only animal that could see the approach of Cunanan, hounds of hell. Unable to bear the sharp angles of such thoughts any further, Elizabeth pushed the tent flap aside, allowing the frosted September air to swallow her wholly. Cold clouds scuttled over the face of a vapid moon, throwing a swift succession of shadows across the cliffs rising near the edge of camp. Flickering moonlight illuminated rocky formations plunging down the sides of the mountains. Witches' Rocks, they were called, conjuring the witches of Llandudno of her youth. Please, she tried to pray, struggling for the peace and faith she had felt at conversion, had felt many times on this journey since. But she had so recently adopted a new truth, and her mother's mother had repeated tales from Glamorganshire far longer still. Winds howling through the canyon summoned stories of the disembodied moan of death, and Elizabeth wished for a sprig of rowan to tuck in her pocket. Alone in this endless night, she could no more ward off superstition than she could breathe wellness into the body of her littlest one, any more than she could heal the man she loved lying prostrate in a wagon. But if Annie, no, she could not think such a terrible thought. Skittering clouds sent terrible shapes over the face of the mountain, and the words her mother had said at their departure came unbidden to her mind. She could not help but whisper them, her breath rising in hoarfrost. Sure, love, if you persist in this religious madness, you will come to no good end. The ground glittered with crushed gems, hard and frozen, and Elizabeth's foot struck against a rock sharper than the rest. Wincing, she tightened the stained and filthy rags bound round her feet to replace shoes that had shriveled to pieces somewhere in Wyoming. 2 more useless objects littering the edges of the trail. Please, she tried to pray again. Please help us. Her words were snatched by passing shadows, torn and tangled by frantic winds. During their ocean crossing, Elizabeth had watched a mother push a child-sized bundle into the sea, had seen that mother's body sail onward while her heart remained behind. Here, on this trail of suffering, where shoes and bones collected on both sides of the roadway, why should her own child be spared? She turned away from the night, returning to her sleeping dear ones. At the opening of the tent, 2 hazel eyes watched solemnly from beneath folds of fabric. 2 arms waited patiently, trusting the night to return her mother. An oddly perceptive child, this one. Elizabeth hastened her steps. Plentenhall, hush, child, though the girl had not uttered a syllable. Back to bed with you, Maddie. But the 4-year-old was still young enough to trust her heart, more than her mother's placating words. Ma'am, she called, knowing the tent to be far too quiet. Brisk footsteps, a sharp cry of mourning against a baby's nightdress. Maddie reached for her sister's unmoving hand, listened to her mother's choking sobs, and wished for the power to calm cries and breathe life back into stillness. But the world outside Maddie's tent was big and oh so dark. What could she do, such a small and girlish thing? Still even too young to walk with the children at the front of the wagons. What could she do? I hope that you have enjoyed this brief excerpt from the novel Her Quiet Revolution, the story of Martha Hughes Cannon, frontier doctor and first female state senator, read to you by Marianne Monson and with permission by Shadow Mountain. I hope that you will perhaps enjoy reading the rest of this book. Thank you so much.